talk about the president's visit. He has been giving speeches, he's made that secret visit to Ukraine, but today he's meeting a group of nations known as the Bucharest Nine, which, as you pointed out earlier, quite a lot of people wouldn't have heard of as a group before. Explain their significance and what was being discussed today.
Yeah, so it was formed in 2015 by Poland and Romania because of the Russian invasion of Crimea, the seizure of Crimea, and it was the border states, and it's a good grouping, and given that the American president was there, it makes sense to have another declaration to strengthen it. The more declarations you can have, the better, because they all say essentially the same thing. Behind that is the fact that this goes from north to south, and it brings out the fact that the northern members of NATO or whatever it is in Europe, they have a slightly different agenda. The northern members worry about Russia, they worry about the North Atlantic. The southern members tend to worry about illegal migration, economic development, what's happening in the Western Balkans, which looks as if it might blow up again. And so their agendas are different. Holding them together is easy in a big declaration, but behind that declaration, I think there will be some tensions, which we may hear about in the next week or two.
Talking about countries and their own agendas, can we talk about how different countries' support for Ukraine has changed or not over the course of this year?
Very good point. This was the General Assembly on the 2nd of March last year. So immediately after the invasion of Ukraine, the General Assembly introduced a resolution really strong. It deplored the invasion and demanded that Russia withdraw immediately. And that was the result. 141 states voted in favour, 5 states voted against. That was Russia and Belarus, North Korea, Syria and Eritrea. So they were the 5 holdouts. But 35 states abstained. And so if you put those together, 35 plus 5 is 40. It was 141 to 40. That's pretty decisive. But those 40 states actually involved more than half of the world's population. And when we looked at that as analysts, we said, OK, it'll be interesting to see how that changes over the months. A year later, no change. No change.
Quite remarkable, isn't it? And of course, all those countries have different reasons for that. As we said, their own agendas, hedging their bets as to who may come out in front in this war. And can we talk about Latin America? Because it's the ripple effect of war, isn't it? All international diplomatic decisions have an effect. And as far away as Brazil, you know, Latin America, decisions being made here have an effect on Ukraine. How?
The global south. And you'd say, well, Latin America, surely. Everyone assumes that America dominates Latin America. Latin Americans follow what America's do. Not at all. A lot of the Latin American countries have weapons that are either ex-Soviet weapons or weapons that the Ukrainians could use. So there's quite a lot of weapons in Latin America which would be really useful in Ukraine. America made a really generous offer to Latin American states. They said, if you transfer your weapons to Ukraine, we will replace them one for one with modern American weapons. None of them agreed. None. And so the holdout, I mean, Mexico didn't agree. The 3 big important states, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, none of them agreed. Colombia didn't agree. Ecuador didn't agree. A flat no to a really generous offer. They said no neutrality. The only state that's gone along with a bit of it is Chile, and Chile has offered some demining equipment. I mean, not exactly important. And interestingly, public opinion in Latin America is behind that view. Public opinion in Latin America is neutral. They want to stay neutral. And the point is, any diplomat will tell you, being neutral in this war means that you don't mind if the Russians win. Because any peace talks, any ceasefire means that the Russians will keep whatever they've conquered. That's the way it is. So countries that opt for neutrality are not saying they want the Russians to win, but what they're saying is, well, we don't really mind if they do. And that's the problem that President Biden has. He goes to Poland, he makes a ringing endorsement, but the global south kind of shrugs its shoulders and says, we don't really believe this is about democracy and freedom and rule of law. We think this is just another war.
Yeah, not our war.
Not our war.
Specifically. With regard to the weapons, obviously the weapons that Latin America will have, you said are older models, so low tech. And the reason they would work in Ukraine is because presumably it's the kind of equipment that Ukraine has already, would take very little training.
Absolutely.
You know, they're asking for Leopard 2 tanks.
The old
delay in that we keep hearing, don't we?
Yeah, they're the old T-72 tanks, lots of artillery ammunition. And, you know, nobody in Latin America needs any military force. Most of them are sort of the vanity projects of their leaders. I mean, Latin America is a very peaceful continent. Now that the FARC war is over in Colombia, the whole of Latin America is at peace.
Okay.
Lots of tensions, but no war.
Yeah, lots of tensions. And presumably, obviously, America's offer is we will replace, those weapons for new weapons. But again, that's not going to be very good for Latin America because, again, it comes down to training, maintenance, and America presumably aren't offering that.
Yeah. No, but it was a very generous offer. Yeah. I mean, who wouldn't want to get rid of their old stuff and get modern American stuff in its place? And it was a test. It was also a test of loyalty. And, the anti-Americans always assume that America somehow has a sort of post-colonial grip on Latin America. Not a bit of it. Not a bit of it. Yeah. I mean, the United States has surprisingly little influence in Latin America, where people used to think they dominated. They really don't. And, of course, there are some real holdout states. So Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba, those are left-wing dictatorships who won't touch America with anything. You don't expect any change out of them for anything the Americans say. But Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, those are the big three. Yeah. If they go along with something, the others will. And they wouldn't go along with this.